the damning court judgments on the care of some children, I'm how confident that with the people now in place at a senior level, and I include the new chief executive in that, we will be doing a lot better in 2 years' time. The children's case is just one area. We're working hard on being better at delivering projects to budget and on time. An example of that being Marlborough School. But we can only do this for future projects and not past projects. We are also working in the council on being more transparent and open, and what I would loosely term the idea of being bottom up, that is listening to the community and exploring what the community want rather than telling the community what they should have. The second kind of motivation I have is to try to encourage people to want to stand for both parish councils and ward councillors. We are tremendously grateful for all of you for your work and service. You get a hard time sometimes from people, so do we. As you can imagine, sometimes we're a bit of a punch bag. We just accept that. I'm just hoping that in a couple of years' time, people will have seen that we've been able to make a difference, and that they'll be encouraged and want to.
Hiya, where are you?
Sorry, leader. Can I just ask whoever's on? Can we have everyone on mute? That's not.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I apologise. That's Lemster talking in the corner there.
Okay, so today's summit gives me the opportunity to introduce the Chief Executive and perhaps comment a little bit on what I have said. I know he is very keen on transparency and enhancing the council's reputation and the trust in the council. And secondly, we will talk about the parish charter. The old one is dated, and I think there can be a new one explaining how we work together now. We have to work together because local authorities have much less funding than they had 10 years ago. We have the significant emergence of talk community, which isn't really reflected in the current version of the parish charter. So we can all build that in, hopefully, the second part of this session. So without any further ado, I will pass you over to Paul Walker. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, David, and good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. John's already given me the advice that to keep it light and not too serious. He's already started to set the bar high with his jokes about no trousers, which is yet to be revealed, but I don't see a long list of people queuing up for that. But what I wanted to do tonight for the next 15-20 minutes is try and keep it light, but share a little bit with you about my thoughts since joining Herefordshire. It's kind of week 8 for me, I think, when I checked on the calendar at the start of the week. So I want to say a little bit more about, some of my initial views and thinking, what's in my mind in terms of priorities. Talk a little bit about talk community, and also to share with you some of the insights into the COVID-19 recovery plan which are coming through. So there is a presentation, but I'm going to try and keep it light and kind of skip through things as we go along. And as part of it, what I want to do is share some of the feedback I've had in response to my letter to parish council clerks about tell me what the one thing is that we can do to improve. As you would expect, when you ask that kind of question, we've had a good and healthy response. Probably no surprises in there, but people have taken the time and trouble to get in touch. So I wanted to share some of that. In the good old Chris Whitty style, if we could say next slide, please. So a little bit about me in terms of why Herefordshire. I get asked that many times. Well, I suppose for me, public service is probably one of the reasons why I get up in the morning. It's important to me, making a difference to people's lives, improving outcomes for local residents. And being a chief executive is a privilege, and it's a privilege I thoroughly enjoy and love doing my job. And Herefordshire is a place I wanted to come and be chief executive, not just because of the ability to work in public service at a senior level, but because of the level of ambition the council and the county has to deliver improvements for its local residents, to kind of focus on the economy and to really punch above its weight in terms of its achievement. All those things really important to me in terms of attracting me to Herefordshire. But having come here, it's, you know, in the first 90 days, as they say, because chief executive only get 90 days. I think the president of the United States gets 100 days, but in the chief executive's rule book, it's 90. You know, how do I make best use of those 90 days to develop my learning and understanding? And I'm doing that in a number of ways. Much of it is centered around people, meeting people, and as many people as I can, both staff from across the organisation, our elected members, our partners, and included in that is colleagues from across the parish councils which support the success of the county. And along with that, it's going out to see things for myself, whether it's children's centres, the local library, the archive centre, or spending, you know, a day in Ross, and then, you know, the time I'm going to spend in Leominster and Kington and Ledbury, learning more about those market towns and what's important to people in those particular areas. So my approach is very much around a visible leadership style. I like to get out and see things for myself. I like to work with partners and find win-win situations in all that we do. And in doing that, let's deliver better outcomes. So what do I think so far? Well, some early reflections that I've been building up over the last few weeks. I think the first thing to say, we've got good and committed staff. Many of them live in the county. You know, they feel part of what the council does and want to be associated with success. You know, we've done well and delivered well through the COVID emergency, whether that's through Talk Community or our public health service or our colleagues in environmental health. All have come together well. But as David said earlier, you know, we've got some challenges with reputation. Some people don't think we're that good at what we do. And that might be true, or it might be a perception. But as I learned a long time ago, if it's a perception, it's true for those people. So I think there's a lot for the council to do in terms of building its reputation, trust and confidence of local people. That's taken a hit recently with children's services. But I think linked to the work we need to do around communications, and telling a better story about what we do, showing people what happens within the council by being open and transparent, and sharing the success and the work that we do to contribute to new initiatives. There's also a feeling from across the staff that it's a bit of a siloed organisation and doesn't work well corporately. And some of that comes through in the feedback I've had from colleagues and friends and colleagues in the in parish councils. So there's much to do in terms of those initial views that I've got. And some of that focuses my mind in terms of where we go from here and developing what those priorities for me as the chief executive and the organisation might be. Absolutely top of the list is children's services, a non-statutory improvement notice for 12 months from the Department for Education. We have an advisor working with us, an improvement board put in place, and 12 months to put things right. As David said earlier, we know we are making good progress, good relationships with regulators, good partnership working across health and our other statutory partners from the police. And in many respects, looking forward to delivering those improvements and doing that with and through staff. Our social workers have had a hard time being very much on the blunt end of the reputation of the council, not being fit for purpose in terms of the High Court judge statement and the improvements that are needed. And it's been really important for us to support our staff in those roles. They continue to work hard every day of the week in roles for which they've been heavily criticised publicly. And that's very difficult for us, but keeping people's heads up is important. And we put a lot of time and effort into that. Second on the list has got to be, you know, the COVID recovery plans, whether that's around the economy, community wellbeing, or through the organisation as a whole. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But I think also for me, it's about accelerating progress on a number of projects or initiatives the council's had in its gift for some time, whether that's around the transport strategy and landing what the future of the transport strategy is for the county going forward. And how some of our work around infrastructure investments within the city centre and our transport delivery programmes running alongside the work and investment we're doing in the enterprise zone. But as well as, you know, making things happen and delivering projects, there is also things like, well, how we're going to deal with phosphates and the impact phosphates has within our local community, and the development that's paused as a result of it. And then more recently, how do we bring forward work that we've done with our health partners and delivering an integrated care sector, an integrated care system across the county. And last but not least, and I know colleagues from across parish councils will be very seriously interested in, is our work with the core strategy. And as we review the core strategy and take it forward, everybody be interested in that. Site allocations process and consultation, really key parts of that. Well, moving on to parish councils, which are very important for me. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. Very important to me, as I said in my letter to parish council clerks, you know, they have a direct relationship with local communities. You know that. You know, they're delivering local services and delivering more local services as each year goes by, and you know that too. The custodian of our local assets, you know, they love and care for those assets in a way that perhaps the local authority will never do because it's not for them physically or geographically. But I think for me, the real opportunity is how we reshape our relationship with parish councils, so we get better outcomes for local people by having better relationships with and through parish councils and the council as a whole. But I did want to share with you what some of the feedback is that's come back to me from parish councils. There's a summary of headlines there, and I just wanted to pick out a few. You know, closer working relationships, not a surprise, you know, but the reality of the words are achieved through dialogue and trust, working more closely with Balfour Beatty and making sure that they deliver. A code of conduct, and a view that the current code of conduct measures for parish councils are weak and ineffective. And that's pretty honest reflection as to where we are. So what do we do about it? Improving communication between parish councils and Herefordshire Council, that's not a surprise. But listening to parish council's recommendations and then asking officers within the council to act on them and stop making excuses when you can't solve things. On environmental issues, tackling the pollution on the Wye, yes, we talked about that, but taking action against chicken farmers and being direct and tackling that issue and enforcing where we can. And lastly, around Section 106 agreements, giving parish councils a voice and listening to parish councils in how the 106 agreements are spent and how the funding is applied to the development of local improvements. So no shortage of good, strong and direct feedback, and for us to act on and to take that forward. But moving on to the next slide, there was also a long list of operational issues associated with those parish councils who got back in touch with me. I've got a programme of visits to go out and meet those people. So, you know, I'm going to pick up those specific issues which have been raised directly from parish councils to tell me what's happening in their local area that needs attention. But as I said earlier, this is very much around how we work together better, how we reshape the relationship so we deliver better outcomes from local people. And at the heart of that for us in the council is our Talk community. The Talk community initiative is a successful partnership, and it's been developed even further through our work we've done together through the COVID-19 emergency. But it does give us that platform to build even more sustainable partnerships, whether that's around developing more collaborations and doing even more things together, or is it simply about building on the strengths and capacity and the resources that Talk community can bring to the conversation to support the development of what's happening. But I did say I wanted to talk about COVID recovery plans. I want to do that for a moment. They cut across three particular areas: the economic recovery, which is vital for us in terms of our continued economic performance, community well-being and how we support health and well-being across our local communities, and the recovery across the organisation as a whole. The strategy we've adopted is that we want to, you know, accelerate some of the actions that we have in the county plan and bring those forward. But we also want to focus on some immediate actions which will show a visible sign of a change within our local communities. Overall, there's £6 million been put to one side to help focus those recovery plans and deliver some immediate improvements over the next 6 to 9 months. There's a formal report going to the Cabinet tomorrow evening for them to consider the proposals. And then, subject to that approval, we'll go forward with the delivery and implementation. But a quick cook's tour of what's on that list. If we could just go through to the next slide, please. So on the recovery, Revive and Thrive, as we call it, grants to support the first 6 months rent in vacant retail unit and business spaces. So let's occupy some of those empty shops, some of those empty retail units, and support businesses with grant support in the first 6 months. A Visit Herefordshire promotion to raise the profile of Herefordshire as a staycation opportunity. A £1.5 million fund to love going out locally and incentivise your local people to spend and visit local attractions and enjoy all of that, together with financial support to make it happen. And at the bottom of that slide, in terms of a Shop Local, Love Local promotional campaign, again promoting our local town centres and encouraging people to get out and enjoy that range of independent shops. On to the next slide. £500,000 going into great places to visit, revitalising and almost giving the opportunity to greening of town centres and providing grants to shopfront enhancements, infrastructure events and improvement to public rights of way and cycling routes. Return to towns and cities, taking away the barrier of costs for use of our bus service and looking to provide discounts for our bus services, as well as free use of our barrel bikes, and placing barrel bikes subject to consultation with yourself into our market towns. And then lastly, about joining up for jobs and one-stop advice for people to get the right location to access a range of training to get them back into work. So that's our thinking around the economy. We also have a focus on community wellbeing too. If we could go to the next slide. And around resilience and helping people get back out and rebuilding support systems for socialisation. It's about getting active and how we can provide support so people can access leisure and cultural activities and expand our community assets so that people can enjoy that particular activity, as well with access to health checks, which haven't been as available as we would like over the last 16 months. On the list has to be mental health. We get a considerable amount of feedback around mental health and the impact the pandemic's had on people's mental health. So putting cash aside for that to be supported and to provide access to those services for everyone who needs them. And then moving on to the next slide, very much around alcohol awareness. We've seen an increase in figures around alcohol consumption and the harmful impact that has, and the pressure that presents on our health services. So again, a programme to help those who need that help and provide that presence that's needed. And then last on the list is around digital poverty and exclusion and how we can accelerate and scale up existing support services so that people in the community, where it's needed, can access digital services with and through our community access and infrastructure. So there's a range of initiatives which we've discussed with colleagues across the council, we've discussed with elected members, and we're going forward at the Cabinet tomorrow for approval on those, and then get on and deliver them, make them happen so that people can see a visible sign of a change. But the last thing from me before I stop is a reminder to everyone to keep sending me those emails, keep telling me about those things and ideas that you'd like to see improvements and suggestions on. I'm taking time to respond to all of them. I will be getting out to as many places as I can over the next 2 to 3 months, meeting as many of you as I can on a face-to-face basis and allowing you to bring your stories to life and for allowing me to learn more about Herefordshire County. Thank you very much, David. And I think at that point, I hand on to John Harrington with trousers.
Yes, I have got trousers on. Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify something you said, Paul. You sort of, in your run through, you said something about taking action against chicken farmers. I think what we meant in our conversation we had earlier was making sure that we were managing our manure, which happens to be chicken manure, but all our sheds are legal and that everyone's doing their best. And in terms of that and the way that we work with sewerage water companies, we need to be addressing that so that we can unlock a moratorium.
I think the point, John, was it was the feedback that we were getting, and I think the clarification is that we need to.
I beg your pardon.
We need to tell the story about what we're doing.
Sorry, Paul. Yeah, I've got my trousers down again. Apologies.
Yeah, no worries.
You were relaying back what people had said to us. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I just want to I wasn't due to speak, but I just wanted to give a little bit of good news since we've got everyone in the room today. Let me just silence that because people are now trying to message me to say what a fool I am, which I already knew. I gave a pledge that we would try and find some drainage money again. Last year we had that £250,000 worth of drainage grant money, which a lot of parishes put to good use that had Lensmans, and Lensmans registered with Balfour Beatty and therefore the council. We are going to commit to that again this year. We have found the money to do that, and that will be announced in the not too distant future. So for all you parish clerks and parish councillors, there is another £250,000 worth of drainage grant money, which will be used for particularly parishes that are struggling with serious issues of flooding, and also used slightly differently this year for any parishes that would like to set up flood protection and prevention schemes, a little bit like Bodnam and other places have done. So that will be shortly announced. The second piece of good news is I've managed to persuade both our finance cabinet member and our section 151 officer that we will try and bring back, well, we will be bringing back a 250 grant per year for general Lensman scheme for, we hope, 5 years on a match funding basis, and probably have to be on a sliding scale. So it'll be match funded to begin with, maybe at 50%, and then sliding down to less and less over the next 5 years. But we can't do it any other way because that's, the issue is revenue as opposed to capital. And we simply don't, as a council, have the revenue anymore. We've lost £62 million a year in just one grant since 2010, which was a revenue support grant. We used to get £62 million, we get about £600,000. And that's one of the issues why we're all struggling to make sure that Balfour is properly funded, and while you as parishes have that support. But we have settled a dispute with Amy, and as a result of that, we have some money that we'll be able to give directly to the parishes, because we know that they actually make very good use of that. So that's just a little bit of good news I thought I'd let you know about. Details to follow. And if you haven't registered your Lensman's grant, and you do have Lensman and haven't registered them with the council, please do. And please consider it going forward, because we would like to bring in this grant for 5 years. The second grant, the more substantial open grant for Lensman. So thank you. Oh, and I'm handing over to Jenny Bartlett. Sorry, Jenny, Councillor Bartlett.
That's great. And thank you, John. That's really good news. And also to see there's some really useful comments popping up in the chat as well. So maybe we could capture those as well as the request for sending out the slides. So what I just wanted to share with you, some of us and not all of us are aware of, it is where the history of the Parish Charter that we were talking about on the invite comes from. So in 2011, the Localism Act became law. And this is the legislation that has given parishes the power of competence to do more with their precept at the local level. It's given us the right to challenge for services and to bid for assets of community value. So this was part of the government's ambitions at the time to decentralise power away from Whitehall and back into the hands of local councils to our communities and our individuals, so we could act on our own local priorities. So our 2011 Parish Charter sets out how we were going to achieve this. So that charter we have is now 10 years old. So it's out of date now and it's rather stuffy. And I doubt very much if any of us actually refer to it anymore. And quite frankly, the world has moved on. central government funding for local authorities has reduced, as John said. You know, it has changed as well, far more than we ever expected. And on top of that, we're now emerging from a global pandemic that has affected everyone. And as you say, we're setting out a plan to address that. So, you know, our intentions, Herefordshire Council, parishes, everybody, you know, we want to work together. We've always wanted to work together for the benefits of our residents and our communities. That's not changed. But so setting down in a charter what our joint commitments are, what our guiding principles are going to be, so to achieve this, that's still relevant, I think. So really, we're talking about, you know, we're building on these partnerships we've all mentioned, the work of Talk Community, on the magnificent responses of our communities to COVID-19. So really, you know, it is time to sit down, to co-produce a new and stronger parish charter between us that can reflect these changes, that we can use what we've learned so far to set down how it is that we want to work together from now on. And so coming to the main part of the workshop, I'm going to hand over to Amy so she can set out how we're going to tackle that tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor. So I've got a couple of slides, not much to go through, just mainly one slide in terms of what the main workshop is about. But I'm Amy Pitt, I'm the Assistant Director for Talk Community. If we just click on to the next one. So we've got some time now ahead of us, about 40 to 50 minutes to really have this conversation that we're looking to have with you. Really to think about how, you know, listening to parishes in terms of that collaboration with you, and to, as Councillor Hitchin and Bartlett and Paul have said tonight, around resetting and reshaping those relationships, to have these bigger conversations that we really want to have with you, and then to also to build back better from the COVID pandemic. So what we're looking at in terms of 3 specific areas that will break out now into workshops is, one area we want to focus on is what has worked really well over the past 12 to 24 months. And that's, we wanted to kind of cover the COVID period, but also before COVID as well. And also on the flip side, what hasn't worked so well during the same period. And then what we really want to get into is how can we collectively develop new ways of working together for now and in the future, and what that looks like. What we're sort of asking for as part of this is you will have facilitators in the room with you. They will be Talk Community Development Officers who will be supporting this, and sort of rules of engagement as we have tonight. Put yourself on mute if you're not speaking. Please use the chat function, raise your hand for answering a question. But what we're really looking for as well is to have some positive discussions to explore the opportunities and the real opportunities that we have here to take this to the next step forward. So without further ado, what we'll do now is we have allocated you all into workshop and workshop groups. There's 4, and now we'll start sort of sending people off into those workshops to have those discussions, and we'll come back shortly to have a group discussion.
I was just wondering whether, because we're only just starting on the 3rd section, whether there's a couple of minutes to do around the room on working together. If anybody who was trying to add something to how we could work together better has been cut off in mid-flow and they wanted to say something over the next couple of minutes in the main room.
I'm quite happy to share something. I think just following on from the conversation we were having, and we're talking in question 2 about communication and one thing and another. I think for me, what could working better, I think, is around accountability. We touched on 106 money. We have a project where we require some 106 money. I've been trying to get just a question answered for 6 months. And each time we ask that question, because of COVID, we're working from home, we'll get back to you when we can. There's no accountability for many things. And I take on board the fact that there isn't money available and there are hoops to jump through and so on and so forth, same as everybody else has mentioned. But bottom line, some accountability when things aren't working. Somebody actually goes, we could do this differently.
Some of those have been waiting for 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
that was quite a key theme that I think came through, certainly from the group that I was facilitating around the section 106 as well. A key, and I'm guessing it's probably a key theme for all 4 groups that sort of came through. So yeah, I mean, if there's anything else, as Councillor Bartlett said, maybe one other person who maybe would just want to, if there's anything else from that last question, because I'm just conscious we have got 5-10 minutes now that we can feed back each of the facilitators. We're planning on feeding back from each of the sessions, but if there's anyone who's got something burning, they felt they missed off in that group, please, if there's got an opportunity now for a minute or so, or if not, we'll head straight into feedback.
Amy, can I ask if these email addresses are all available for everyone so we could contact each other? So there's a couple of questions being raised around section 106 planning enforcement that would deserve a good answer.
Yeah, we can circulate. Yeah, we've got all the email addresses. As long as everyone's comfortable with that, we can circulate that to almost. We can put an attendees list together for tonight.
That'd be great.
Yes,
so we can
no
address
problem.
the questions and keep the conversation going. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
If anyone would rather not have their email address shared, because I know some of them are personal, then please just send us an email to the address where we were sending all the information out from, and then we'll just take you off the list. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so if we can just go back into some feedback then from the 4 groups. So we've got a couple of the facilitators. I'm going to look at Karen first, just because you're there in my eyesight. Karen, is there anything, you were a facilitator, weren't you, one of the groups?
I was, you just caught me frantically scribbling from my notes. Everything that we've captured, Jess, we will feed in, but in terms of what worked well, there was the mobilisation of volunteers locally in terms of the COVID response. So people got involved who didn't normally, and they acted at a very local level. And historically, it can be quite hard to get people involved. So that worked well. The opportunity to do things virtually where people can, so it frees up time in terms of having to travel so people can get involved, and also people actually watched meetings online where they may have not actually gone and turned up at a meeting, so it meant that there was that kind of engagement at a local level. And things being done on a local level by parishes, so things like response to flooding, ditch digging, footpath maintenance, that kind of thing. So it's the things that work well at that local level. You can be more responsive, and people are more likely to let you know about some of the issues, and therefore you can do something about it. In terms of the things that haven't worked so well, there is a lot of digital poverty, and some people either can't or don't want to engage, and that presents a number of issues. Section 106, we heard loud and clear, there's been a lot of problems in that in terms of accessing the money, but also the clarity of what the process is, whose money it is, where it is, how you access it. So I think there's some communications to be done around that, and some awareness raising, and putting things online so that it's clear, so that everybody knows and they know where to access that, and it's transparent. There have been issues with the planning process, NDP being one part of it, but also a lot of issues around retrospective planning, and there hasn't been enough enforcement. Consultations, not enough notice and not very accessible. Even a simple thing like putting a print function on a consultation so that parish clerks and others can share that with members of their community, and you can have sight of the whole consultation in one go. And far too much red tape, particularly with BBLP. You know, the number of hoops you've got to jump through just to plant some plants, it's ridiculous, and the time it takes is ridiculous. So going forward, things that we could do better, much more to happen at a local level where there is the appetite for that, because we can be more agile. Consultation and communications need to be better. For example, some of the information around the funding that we had at the start of the meeting, this was the first time some people had heard about that. So it's about how do we find out. And also we think, at least in one instance, the chair of the parish council wasn't aware of this meeting. Now, whether that's because we've missed them off the list, we've asked for details and we'll follow that up, or whether it's in spam. So it's how we make sure people know that these things are happening and how they can get involved. And then just exploring partnerships and scales of economy. So maybe parishes could group together or link in with their town council around things like grass cutting and footpath maintenance, etc. That's it from us, I think.
Great, thank you, Karen. Emily, do you want to, couple of minute feedback from your group?
Yes, I'm here. So we were in workshop 2. Some of the key themes of things that were working well was actually Zoom was a really strong theme that a lot of people raised, that it gave more people an opportunity to attend meetings that wouldn't have been able to before and help people maintain those relationships. And that's something that people would like to see keeping going moving forward. Again, some just kind of the local community support, particularly during COVID, of communities and businesses working well together. We actually had feedback that the grant process was really good, really quick and efficient, and they were very impressed with how quickly they were managed to get getting those processed and the number of groups that were supported through that. Things that haven't worked so well, quite a few themes there around communication and people being kept up to date with what's happening and knowing who to contact and how best to get hold of the right person when there's information that they need. There was quite a theme there around Balfour as well, with things happening within the communities without it being communicated to the councils or the local residents, particularly in relation to the faster shire and polls going up without people knowing. Transport issues in rural areas. So there's a few areas where there's only things like 1 bus a day, which is really limiting people's ability to get out of their village and into the cities. Things like the flood responses seem to be focused in the city, and there were rural areas that didn't feel they had the same communication or support that was offered into the cities. In terms of moving forward, the big thing again is kind of communication and consultation. Really positive that I want to keep these summits going. Paul Walker has been personally invited to attend all the rest of them. So I've taken that away as an action, Paul. But it's a real benefit to having some senior officers at this meeting and being able to do peer support across the parish summits as well, and finding out what everybody's difficulties is and how they can work together to support it. And just some more proactive communication, sometimes council.
So clearly some key things that are starting to emerge. And then Jess, I think you were one group as well.
Philippa's the next person.
Philippa, sorry. Then I'll go.
Okay, very quickly then, some of these things obviously that we discussed have already been covered with others, but I'll pick up the things I don't think have already been said. Certainly what went well, the COVID information that was disseminated on a regular basis with all the updates, all the information about what was going on locally and infection rates, all the guidance. That seemed to work very well, although there was quite a lot of it, but it made it easier for things to be disseminated locally and to be able to respond to that quickly. The liaison officers or link workers that were deployed, giving people a contact in a local area was again really appreciated. In regard to the flooding help information and the speed of the reaction was the key thing I picked up there, helping people to fill in the grant forms. Basically, it was that moving quickly and getting the resources that were needed at the right time in the right place. That was appreciated. Again, the speed of getting the letters out to residents was really quick in regards to COVID, and the getting out of the grants on time to businesses. It was felt that particularly by comparison to other places nationally, Herefordshire Council were very good at getting those grants out to businesses, and that was much appreciated. So I'll pop that in there. What didn't go so well, I think we've picked up on this quite a lot. The key theme here really was around Balfour BT, the work there with the contract. There was a feeling of, I've got some key words here, I think there was a feeling of a lack of respect for the information and the knowledge that parish councils have got locally, and the feeling that they're not necessarily heard, and how do they feed that back in, and that there's a lack of equality, and there's an inequality in that ward members get heard, but if your ward member's not on board, the parish councillors don't feel they've got such a good voice. I hope I'm representing my group fairly on this, but I think that was what I was hearing, is they don't feel they're heard. It takes a long time to get responses. I've got quite a few notes around that. There was other phrases like honesty. There's a request for honesty about what funding's available, what can and can't be done, and let's have that honest conversation so that they can respond. But having said that, locality stewards work really well, and that is still a positive in that area. Again, community commissioning. I'll use the phrase, it should be a good idea, but in practice it's stodgy. Future contracting, they'd like to see less bureaucracy. And again, picking up on the accountability around Section 106 money and a request for some training so that people can better understand that. And I have suggested there's other training thoughts, then please let us know in the chat. We ran out a bit of time on the third one, so apologies. The main thing there was no specifics, but definitely let's find a way to do things differently, and let's be a bit more responsive and accountability. You know, there's a lot of delay in waiting for questions to be answered, and there needs more accountability. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa. So I was in the group one, but I'll feedback that from that group. I won't go into a huge amount of detail because I think most of it's been covered. But some of the really positives was the COVID response. Some fantastic responses are out there in the community, and building on that, a couple fed back in terms of Talk Community COVID support. I promise you they did say that. I'm not saying that because I'm presenting back. So some really good sort of positive coming through from that perspective. I think obviously the Section 106s was a concern, as well as BBLP as well, but also the rurality of some of our areas, and actually sometimes it's, you know, they are forgotten about, and how do we support them, the very rural areas as well. I think we had some really good discussions about what potentially key headings that could come into the parish charter, particularly about some key areas that we need to kind of address. But I suppose one of the key things I think some of were saying in our group was actually, although some of these negatives were, or they felt maybe like concerns, but there was a real opportunity that maybe we've got now to turn these into some positives in terms of how we can work together now in the future, which I think is really, really great. One of the things as well we discussed, and I sort of wanted to mention here as a wider group, is we'd like to consider and get views on a parish reference group. So a number of, and it could be potentially be in locality areas or primary care network footprints. So then we can liaise with those reference groups, build up things like straw mans, test ideas, test thinking, really, you know, understand some of the problems and issues and concerns in terms of how we take this forward. And then at these parish summits, sort of present them back in terms of where we are and how we're doing that collaboratively with our parishes. And if anybody is interested in that, then, you know, really, really like to hear from you. Our group sort of thought that would be a good idea. I don't know if there's anything, I'm conscious of time, but maybe in the chat, if people feel that would be a helpful way to move forward. And like I said, if people are interested in that, then please do. We will send that out to you all and let you know where you can contact us to put yourself forward on that area. So I think that kind of brings us to an end on that kind of section. I don't know from Councillor Hitchener if there's anything you would like to cover off at all, or from that part.
Well, I was going to say things at the end, but I'll pick up on a couple of points. Someone in our group was saying how perhaps the rural places are being a little bit left out. So Hereford benefits, and then now we're talking about the market towns. Well, what about all the other areas? And just to make you aware, that is in our mind as a cabinet. We have talked about that. It's been felt that Hereford everything's been Hereford centric. So now we're moving out to the market towns, and the next step after that is to look at the more rural areas, because we're such a rural county. So that's just to let you know that's in our minds. The other point that struck me was that how, if we as a centre are saying we want to devolve more things to parishes, that's putting more responsibility on parishes, but it puts pressure on people in the parishes. It puts pressure on the parish councillors. It makes it harder for you, more responsibility, and that's something I'd not really thought about particularly. And we don't want people to feel pressured by that. So I mean, it's just something for us as the council and as cabinet members just to reflect on that. There are no immediate solutions, but something we mustn't forget about. If we are to work successfully with parishes, then it's got to be a team effort, and we mustn't be expecting too much of all the volunteers. We're just terribly grateful for all you're doing. So that was just a reflection on that. The people who've attended, I think, are mostly chairs of parish councils. We do have a capacity to have 2 people for every parish council if we wanted to. And that would be great if we could, if you do want to invite somebody else from your parish council, that's fantastic. And I do feel we've got quite a lot of common ground. I was thinking about the Section 106 money. To my mind, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's totally within our power. we should jolly well be helping with you and working with you and spending it. And I know Andrew Lovegrove is here, and Andrew would like delighted to get rid of all the money as quickly as possible. So, you know, it's all in our power. We should jolly well be doing something about it. With BBLP, it is slightly different. We're in partnership with somebody else. We're dependent on them. But with Section 106 monies, come on, guys, you know, let's deal with that one. I'm sure we know that. And Paul might kill me afterwards, but that's how I feel about that. I think the what Balfour Beat is harder, but we're working on that too. Amy, that's much more than I intended to say at this stage.
No, thank you. And I mean, I don't know if Paul, if there's, sorry to put you on the spot as well, if there's anything from you want to, I mean, we have got we've got some questions that we would like to ask you at the end, which is a polls, but I don't know if there's anything particularly you wanted to round off as well from tonight.
No, I think I would like to. I thought the honesty was really refreshing in the workshops, and it wasn't all negative. You know, it was a good mix of positive comments, people reflecting the good things that have happened and quite happy to reflect the good things that have happened. Balfour Beat is, I think it's the most overused word of the night, and that may be the same for every meeting. And so there's clearly a message in there for me and others to do something about it. But I thought the kind of directness and the openness and the honesty was refreshing. In the group I was in, people were saying what they thought, and it was both positive and constructive in terms of where we can make improvements. I think for me, Amy, I just want to get a sense of what next with the parish charter. How do we make some real progress with that? And if you could talk a little bit more about how we do that and how we take that forward.
Yeah.
You know, if I can help and others can help get our shoulders behind that. There's clearly great support from what I've heard in terms of talk community and parish councils coming together. I think there's some common themes that are coming out. So I think for me, it's, you know, what do we need to do to kind of push that along?
Yeah, and thanks, Paul. Yeah, and what I'd really like to do is to kind of set up this parish council reference group to take this conversation forward, because I think, like I said, there's some really rich conversations here today in terms of, and some really good common ground that we could take forward. So I think that reference group is going to be really important. And I'm conscious that, you know, everyone's volunteering, and it's potentially another thing that we're asking, but I think it's really important that outside of these meetings we are meeting to discuss and to take this forward. So after tonight, what we will do is we'll circulate the slides. We'll also take the notes from the comments here and any questions, you know, get some responses to those and get those circulated. And as part of that, we'll send out a request in terms of people that are interested and want to volunteer to come forward into the reference group for us to really take forward some of these key areas. And I think what's really key as well, that it's not just talk community can absolutely lead this, but actually that we've got representation from directorates, from all the directorates across the council, so EMP and children as well, to really support this, to take forward. So that's the next step in this. We have got the next Parish Summit is planned in September. So what we can then do is obviously feed that back in terms of where we've got to, and feedback some of the thinking to date in terms of this parish charter. So yes, we will circulate that after this evening, and hopefully some of you will come forward to work with us and to build on this tonight. So we've just got some poll questions that we would like to ask. I think there's about 4 or 5 questions. If we can get up now, Sharon. I'd just like to apologise beforehand. Some of them may well be ones we've asked previously at the last summit, but we had a bit of a glitch in the system and unfortunately lost all the answers. So so apologies for that. But if you could go down, scroll down in terms of and provide a response to these 4. Again, we'll take that on board, circulate the responses, and we will build on that again based on your feedback to us tonight. And also like to say thank you very much for taking part tonight. I really feel that there's some really good conversations that's happened, and certainly for us to push forward with. So hopefully you've got all those questions now in front of you to be able to.
Yep, we've had 25% voted so far. Oh, 29%, 30%. Please don't let my little hiccup with bringing you back too early sway anything about how useful you found it. I do apologise for that. I was all on my own and I felt very lonely. So I do apologise, folks.
I have to say, you know, this is the first one that Sharon's done, so and I know she's
Hence the mistakes.
she's really one about detail, so she'll be absolutely gutted.
You did a very good job, Sharon. Don't worry
I'm
about it.
kicking myself. I'm very sorry,
Never think
guys.
about it ever again. It was a good job.
You've done a great job, Sharon. Really.
Oh, thank
good,
you.
good.
I'll give you that tenner after the summit, mate. Thank you.
Amy, can I just ask a quick question before we finish? Is there a way that we can have a kind of a constant live group of, you know, parish chairs and clerks in some sort of, you know, not like a group WhatsApp, but some sort of single, you know, email or some sort of single system that means that they can constantly have these kind of conversations, so we don't have to wait, you know, a couple of months for the parish summit, because
That's really
you know,
good.
they're so useful when we come to them, but it's a case of then trying to get everything together, responding, and then waiting another 3 months for things not to have changed, or, you know. So actually, if we had a constant comms that every parish chair or every clerk was on some sort of list, that means that it could, you know, we could all be engaging or much more regularly. I think that would be much more helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I mean, we through Talk Community, we send out our fortnightly letter and newsletter information. So, you know, through that route, if people are finding it helpful or want to add some bits in, you know, please do feedback in terms of what other information we could do. But we could certainly look at that from a kind of an area potentially within the Talk Community website or somewhere, that we could have a parish council section, if you like, in terms of that. So yeah, we can certainly have a think about that in terms of what that looks like.
Can I just quickly ask, we are on 92%. If no one else is going to vote, I'll close the poll and then we can see the results before we head off. Any more for any more? No? Okay, I'm going to close that now. Hopefully you can now see the results.
That's good. Over 90% found it useful or very useful. And future summits. Quarterly. Yeah.
Sorry, bear with me. Yeah.
And that's good to see that you found the newsletter has been helpful. Majority, anyway.
Sorry, guys, I'm just quickly writing these down so we don't lose them again. Sorry. Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So that sort of brings us to the end.
Shall I just wrap up, Amy? Amy, thank you very much. Thank you, Sharon. Done a great job for the first one. And Paul, thank you so much for coming along to this. Really appreciate you spending your time on this. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your volunteering. Thank you for the officers using their evenings as well. Thank you for my fellow councillors. And what do they say? Anybody I know, thank you very much. Is that something like that? Isn't it on the radio programs with music? But no, good. Good time. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.